Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody tonight on Wednesday night in the middle of the week, coming out to study together. Tonight we're going to be, I'm just going to turn my podium like this if y'all don't mind. Tonight we're going to be, just kidding. Wow, it's very heavily loaded on this side. No, it's fine. I'm just playing. It's good to see everybody tonight. Dave Galloway normally teaches this class. He's out of town this week, and so I'm going to do my best to fill in for him. We're studying the book of Habakkuk. So if you want to go ahead and turn there to Habakkuk. It's after Nahum, and Zephaniah is in between those two. And then before we get started, I just want to mention that McIntosh, he had passed away about a week and a half ago, and I've got his obituary and his funeral service card here. His funeral was on June 3rd. Anyway, he was born in 1926 and passed away on May 31st. But I've got a card from his family that I'd like to read for everybody before we get started. The card says, "Brothers and sisters at Ellisville, my brother Dennis, his wife Carol, Phil, and I wanted to thank all of you for all your prayers, cards, visits, cookies, and the many over these past few years. It was very difficult having to move them away from the congregation, but you all made it so much easier. Your kindness will never be forgotten. There are too many of you to list individually, but please know how much we appreciate your thoughtfulness. Love, Gail McIntosh, and whatever her last name is. I'm sorry, I can't read it. But I'll put this on the back if anyone else wants to read it. And if you want to take the time to read his obituary, if you didn't get to know him very well, very interesting life that he led. So I'll put that on the thing in the back. Before we get started tonight, though, let's have a word of prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the blessings that you've given us, for this time that we can come together outside of the world, but together to study your word, to try to make a better impact on our lives, to help us in our daily walk of being examples and a light for you. We ask that you help us learn these things and apply them to our life. We ask that you be with the classes that are meeting downstairs tonight. We pray that a strong foundation is laid for them, the young people who will one day walk in your ways as we train them up. We ask that you be with all of us in this congregation, that you watch over those that are feeling ill with some of the seasonal or other illnesses that are going around. We ask that you care for them as only you can. We ask that you be with the number of hours that are traveling and bring them back home safe to us. We just thank you for every blessing that you give us, and we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so tonight we're going to study the book of Habakkuk. Who already knows a lot about Habakkuk? I didn't, and hopefully I know a little bit more than I did on Monday afternoon when I started looking at this, but I hope that we can get into this topic and find some usefulness of how it can apply to our life, some applications that we can make to put ourselves in Habakkuk's shoes, maybe, to understand some of the things that he went through so that it will better arm us for the difficulties that we face. The book of Habakkuk, the name itself means to embrace or to wrestle. And in this book, we see that Habakkuk does both things. He wrestles with God's concerning the problem of how a holy God can use a wicked nation like Babylon to chasten the people of Judah, and then by faith he embraces God and clings to his promises. Habakkuk also wrestles with the spiritual decline of the nation and why God wasn't doing something about it. At least that's what he was thinking at the time. And at the beginning of the chapter there, at the very top, my Bible says the oracle that Habakkuk, the prophet, saw. This word oracle also translates into a word burden. And perhaps it's a burden that Habakkuk carried with him until he delivered it to the people. If you ever had bad news that you've had to deliver to someone and you have to wait until an appropriate time to do that, when I've had to do that, it is a burden. It's something that you try to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? What am I going to say? How am I going to approach this situation? What I usually want to do is just rip the Band-Aid right off and just tell them the brunt of it right up front. That's not always the best way to do it. Maybe sometimes it is. I don't know, but there's a burden in how you want to deliver these messages sometimes, and that's what Habakkuk had to deal with. I saw a scratch on your neck. I thought you were going to ask a question. All right. Let's read the first 4 verses of Habakkuk chapter 1. Habakkuk chapter 1. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted. Can you see Habakkuk saying, "O Lord, why do you tolerate the sin of the Jews?" Have you ever looked at this world with its injustice and violence and asked the question, why doesn't God do something? Perhaps this question is rhetorical because it seems like every week there's something in the news cycle that makes me ask this question. Why doesn't God do something? Sometimes it looks like the wicked are prospering and the righteous are suffering. Godly people pray, but it seems as though their prayers do no good. And this is the problem that was faced by Habakkuk, and we'll see as we study tonight, solved by Habakkuk. There's an answer to this at the end of this book. I have to keep looking back because I'm running 2 different things, sorry. Habakkuk the prophet faces his doubts and he finds certainty in his faith in chapter 1. And we just read verses 1 through 4. Why is God silent and inactive? In verses 1 and 2, the burden which the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry, and will you not hear? Even to cry out to you violence, and you will not save. What does that make you think when you read Habakkuk saying these things? Does it seem like it's something that just happened, like this problem just occurred? I don't think so. I think this is something that's been going on for a long time, and it's wearing on him. It's eating at him, and he's been praying about it, and he's been asking God for help. Have we ever been in that position? If you're like me, you have, and you sometimes just, it's hard to think about what are we going to do, and that's the problem right there. We think about what are we going to do, or what am I going to do, and you can see that that's similar to what Habakkuk is facing right there. Habakkuk looked out across the world of that day and he saw violence, injustice, spoiling, strife, contention. The law was not enforced. There was no legal protection for innocent people who were sentenced as guilty. The courts were manipulated by selfish lawyers and cruel officials. Again, can you see reflections of some of these things in our own life? And we're not special. Do you think that we're the first ones that have had to deal with these kinds of things? Habakkuk was written approximately 620 years prior to the time of Christ. This thing has been going on a long time. That is, problems in our world. The whole nation was suffering because of the evils of the government or the king or the lack thereof, or what was going on in that civilization. Yet God seemed to be doing nothing about it. Isn't that sometimes a temptation that we have, to think that when these problems are going on, we think that God's not doing anything about it? Why do we think that? Jessica?
It's not being fixed the way we think it should be fixed. We don't know his plan.
Right.
Especially when we're right in the middle of something. It's really hard to be, I don't know, just to get outside of the situation and reflect on it. It seems like, oh, okay, that wasn't as bad as I thought, but when you're right in the middle of it, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, when we're right in the middle of these things that are going on, these things that have been going on for a long time, it seems like nothing's being done. Maybe that's not really true. There might actually be things going on that are being done to help this, but we're not seeing that. We're focused on one part of it. And I like what you were saying is sometimes as we're thinking about this, why isn't God doing something about it? We start to think, well, maybe he should be doing this, or what he needs to do is do that. And we start casting out ideas of how things should be handled and what should be done to correct the problem. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Because that's kind of a scary thing to do, to start dealing out your own ideas of how something should be fixed. And whenever I do that, I tend to think of what the other person or persons are doing, and my way of handling it is usually, off the cuff anyway, a lot more severe than perhaps I would want being done to me. Or it may be even more severe than that. My initial reaction sometimes might just be the worst thing you can imagine, or it's not really looking at the big picture. It's just looking at a part of the picture that I'm thinking that we should fix. In verses 5 through 11, that's what I want to read next. This is God's answer. Because the question that Habakkuk was asking is, why do you tolerate this? Why are you not doing anything about this? And the Lord's answer is in verses 5 and 6, and then continues through verse 11. Let's read that, verses 5 through 11. Look among the nations and see, wander and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe it if I told you. For behold, I am raising up in the Chaldeans that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are dreaded and fearsome. Their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen press proudly on. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle swift to devour. They all come for violence, all their faces forward. They gather captives like sand. At kings they scoff, and at rulers they laugh. They laugh at every fortress, for they pile up earth and take it. Then they sweep by like the wind and go on. Guilty men whose own might is their God. What is it that you see is happening here in verse 5? Look among the nations and watch, but utterly astounded, for I will work in your days which you would not believe, though if you were told. What is God saying there in verse 5? What is he basically saying? What do you think, Jake?
Deuteronomy 29:29.
What's that?
Deuteronomy 29:29.
Okay, what does that say? Read that for us. Deuteronomy 29, verse 29.
I'll give you a second.
I'm going to beat you.
The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law.
Okay, that's good. Let's summarize that.
We wouldn't understand.
Okay, we may not understand it, but he's working on it. Okay, what do you have to say, Becky?
I just think he's saying, oh, I'm about to do something, and you're going to like this even less than what you're currently complaining about.
Right.
Like, you think this is bad, the Chaldeans are coming to destroy you.
That's kind of scary. You're asking God to do something, and he says, oh, I'm going to, and you're not going to like it. Basically what he's saying, isn't it? I had the best kids under me that grew up. They're all here tonight. So I had the best kids, but for real, they were really good. But I wasn't one of the best kids when I was growing up. And so these are kind of examples from when I was a kid probably. But I would have answers ready for what should happen to my sister when she did something bad. And that usually isn't how it turned out. My dad would be like, oh, don't you worry about her. I'll take care of her. I'm going to deal with you right now. I didn't even see that coming. You know, what do you mean worry about me? I thought I was perfect. I still think I'm perfect, but guess what? I'm not. And that's a trap that we fall into. And you're right. I think God's answer is, I am going to deal with this, and you're not going to like it. He said, I'm going to deal with it. And then also, let me go to this next one. Let's look at verses 12 through the end of the chapter and into verse 1 of chapter 2. Habakkuk's second complaint. Are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as a judgment, and you, O rock, have established them for reproof. Who's he talking about? The judgment is going to be upon people of God, and it's coming about through who? Who's bringing this? The Chaldeans. And they're horrible, but yet they're the ones that are going to fix the problem that we have. O Lord, you who are of purer eyes than see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? You make mankind like the fish of the sea, like crawling things that have no ruler. He brings all of them up with a hook. He drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his dragnet, so he rejoices and is glad. Therefore he sacrifices to his net and makes offerings to his dragnet, for by them he lives in luxury, and his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever? Then in verse 1 he says, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. This thing that we asked before, be careful what you ask for. right? He's asking God, how are you going to deal with this? And the question or the statement is, be careful what you ask for. Are there any here tonight who are wise enough to illustrate that saying? Be careful what you ask for. Does anybody have something that they could share with us to illustrate what that be careful what you ask for means? Anybody? I'm just giving a little pause to let you think about that. Have you ever asked for something to be done in a certain situation, and then, as Jessica mentioned before, I've got my ideas, but then, as Becky said, you're not going to like what God's answer is. Maybe you're not going to like the answer that's given. Be careful what you ask for. Go ahead.
In Amos 5:18, when he says, "Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord, for what good is the day of the Lord to you? It will be darkness and not light." We see that a lot of times in the prophets, where the people are like, "We're ready for the day of the Lord," and the prophets are like, "No, you're not. It is not going to be good for you. Stop asking for God to come, because he's coming in judgment."
Right.
I think that could easily apply to all of us.
I would ask everybody to turn to that. Amos chapter 5. And the serpent bit him. It's not the day of the Lord, darkness and not light, and gloom with no brightness in it. Here, this day of the Lord is referencing, this act of judgment. And you're wishing for that to happen. And that's like fleeing from a lion, and you make it. Yoo-hoo! And you turn around, and a bear gobbles you up. That's what we're talking about. Be careful what you ask for.
I think there's a lot of that last weekend we were looking at Micah, and the people were like, "Oh, you've given our land to these scoffers," and without realizing that when God metes out judgment, he does it justly, and guess what? If he's being completely just, you're going to be punished.
Yeah, when God hands out judgment, it's going to be righteous judgment, but that usually is not pleasant on the one being judged, is it? And be careful, because you might be the one caught up in some of that. Be careful about complaining about the sin in the world around us. Do we get caught up in that, complaining about the sin in the world around us, but fail to remember that perhaps we're participating in it ourselves, maybe to some degree or some portion or whatever? I don't think it matters. You want to justify how much you're sticking your toe in that water. Are you doing it? Or are you not doing it? But you're asking God to fix this problem. You're complaining about the problem that's out there. And then when the day of the Lord shows up, you turn around and there's the bear. Lean on the wall and a snake bites your hand. We need to think a little deeper sometimes when we're trying to analyze these issues that we're asking God for help with. Don't ask God to do something about it and then complain about his methods. Kind of what we're going at here. You ever had your kids come to you on a Saturday afternoon and say, "I'm bored"? Did you ever do that when you were a kid? How dumb we were, right? Because the parents always have a way of fixing that, and it's not something that you are going to like. It's not. They're going to do something to fix you being bored, but it's not something that you're going to enjoy. I don't know if this illustration is any good or not, but perhaps it was around 2006 or so. We lived in a small town in Texas. We lived off the road. We had a dirt driveway that went up to our house, and it was a sugar sand type driveway. And I would park in the exact same spot, and I would get out of my car, and I would walk into the house. And I noticed that I was driving into the parking spot over the same tire tracks that I had backed out of earlier that day. And when I'd get out of the car, I'd be stepping into the same footprints that I had left when I got into the car that morning, and I would follow the same path to the door. And I had a thought that was something like, how mundane, how boring things are. It's the same routine, day in, day out. I just remember that time because it was soon after things in my life started changing. Family members started passing away. We moved. I took a different position. There was never really the same routine ever again. And you know what? I kind of miss some of those mundane things that we used to be able to do back then. And those days may never come back again. And I'm not trying to equate that to exactly this, but we don't always think about the things that we have, and we complain about them, and then something changes, and then we think about it. Well, that's too late to think about it after, isn't it? All right, well, let's move on. I think I'm way behind on my slides. Not really. Let's go to this one. I appreciate you guys sitting here quietly because you're just listening. But if you have comments, I would appreciate that. Anybody have a comment? Anybody? Katie?
I was trying to think about something that would apply and also in everyday life. And I remember being at a point where I was I was a kid and I was like, can you just start treating me like an adult? And I soon learned what all that meant. And my dad was not super kind about it. And he should have done what he did, but he was like, okay, you can pay rent and for your food and you can drive, and started laying out all the things that it takes to provide for me. And I think as kids, we don't realize the money that was earned to put the food on the table or that was earned to, provide me a home and a secure life. And it's not until you're out of that situation, out of childhood, where you realize all your parents did for you behind the scenes.
Right.
You just wanted to be at that point, but you didn't know at all what it took to get there. And I kind of equated it to this.
I can see that. We think we want to grow up and have it all, do what we want to do. And I'll bet you anything, as hard as your dad was on you, he still was being easy on you because he wasn't making you pay for insurance. He wasn't making you worry about, am I going to get 40 hours this week? He wasn't worried about, all these things that people think about that he probably didn't put that burden on you. And as you're growing up now, you're seeing more of that, right? But the illustration would go to the part that God is in control. And although we think we can do his job for him, there's so much that we're not even have a clue about what he's got going on. Why do we want to put ourselves in that position? Becky?
And just Habakkuk is really struggling with, wait, why would you use such an evil person to punish us? They're worse than us. I think that there's just a lot of things that we are never going to understand. It kind of goes to the whole Deuteronomy 29:29 there. And just not being able to understand an eternal God. I mean, this week Olivia asked me, did someone in our family have spina bifida that I don't know about? Or did God give me spina bifida? And I was like, what? And I wasn't prepared to answer that. So, but that's just our immaturity and not being able to see the full picture that God can
Right.
see.
Moses was his first 40 years he spent under the Pharaoh's house and doing the things that a Pharaoh's son would do, and learning and becoming knowledgeable and mighty in power and all these things. And then the next 40 years of his life, he was a shepherd. He was out in the mountains, in the deserts, in the plains, whatever. He's herding sheep. He's taking care of sheep. And then the next 40 years, he was doing both of those things with the people of God. Perhaps he wasn't content or thinking about all those things during that time, at a part of that time, maybe not all, I don't know. But if he's like, I just want to think, sometimes maybe he was like me, okay? Because I don't always feel content every step of the day. I think about, well, why this? Why can't I do it? It was all leading him to the part where he could know what to do, and he was being trained on how to take care of the children of Israel. Same thing with Joseph. You look at the stages of his life. Look at your life. Are there things in your life that you have learned? You talked about the stories or the things your dad made you do. It's made you a stronger adult. At least, if nothing else, it's made you understand better what he was providing you with before. And so now you know better how to provide that for yourself and your family. In Habakkuk 2 and verse 1, where it said that he took his stand at his watchpost and he stationed himself on the tower, look out to see what was being done. He said he's going to, he heard God, he knew that God heard his complaint and that he would send an answer soon. Or did he, is what I'm asking. Did he really think that that's what was going on, like he'll send an answer soon? Or was he sitting on that watchtower like, we'll see what he's going to do here. Let's just wait and see.
Kind of makes you wonder if he's kind of like that kid that says, I'm just going to hold my breath until you give in, you know. And
Yeah.
kind of the, like Becky said, the immaturity of the situation when we're trying to dictate to God what he ought to do.
I think it's important that we're painting this picture of how Habakkuk was up to this point. He doesn't fully understand what has happened or is going to happen. But let's look at the next part of chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. Let's read that. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, and so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him. But the righteous shall live by faith. Moreover, wine is a traitor, an arrogant man who is never at rest. His greed is as wide as Sheol, like death. He is never enough. He gathers for himself all nations and collects his own peoples. You know, our job is not to understand everything that God is doing, but to trust that he is doing something and he's got it under control. The things that are in our lives, he's got those things under control. And our job is to have faith in that. God did answer. He said, I have a plan and I have a schedule. It will all work out in due time, so don't become impatient. Then God gave to Habakkuk 3 very wonderful assurances to encourage and strengthen him during those difficult days. And verse 4, look at Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by faith. What do you catch in that? What do you see in that would help us to better navigate through these things? What's that say at the end of verse 4? Did you say raise your hand, Scott? No, are you putting gum in your mouth or something? You better be careful. Jake?
I have no wisdom at all or anything like that, but I just think sometimes I just want to know how everything works and what all's going on at all times and like steps that are being taken for certain circumstances.
Right.
God's wisdom is far beyond our wisdom. And so live by faith that He will provide.
Live by faith that He will provide. It says, but the just shall live by his faith. If you've had kids, or if you're ever in charge of something at work or a school project or whatever, and somebody comes up and questions you about how this thing is going to get done or whatnot, you've already got that figured out if you're doing your job the way you're supposed to be doing it. Have you ever just wanted to tell the person who's questioning you how this is going to happen? Just say, have faith, man. I got this. Don't worry about it. I got it. But sometimes I'm the guy that's questioning the guy and saying, well, but what about this? And what about that? But if you do it like this, did you think about that and think about that and this? And if you do that, this is going to happen. God says, I've got this. Don't worry about it. Put your trust in me. Put your faith in me. Are you the guy that questions everything, or are you the guy that puts your faith in God? That's how we need to be. We need to be the ones that live by faith. Look at these three passages here in the New Testament. This is one of the most important verses in the entire Bible. It forms the text for 3 New Testament books. Turn to Romans chapter 1, and we're going to look at verses 16 and 17. We're going to hit it quick. I might skip the Galatians one. We'll just go straight to Hebrews after we do the Romans one. I'm running out of time. I thought I would be able to make this go longer, but sorry. Chapter 1, verses 17 and 18. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. And then go to Hebrews chapter 10. We'll just jump to that one, because I think this one's very important that we look at. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 32 through 39. But recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. For, verse 37 goes into Habakkuk. Yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith, and if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. This is the key right here in Habakkuk, and these 3 references into the New Testament. I'm a Christian, and I'm about to fall away. I'm struggling. I'm having all these trials, these problems in my life. Now's the time that I need to put my trust in God. When I'm low and I'm down and I'm really struggling, I need to find a way to put my faith and put my trust in God and understand that He is going to take care of it. Look around. Why do you think we're here tonight? Is it simply just to study the Bible with each other? Well, that's a big benefit of it. We're a family. We're supposed to be working together so that we can see the righteousness of each other and the faith. Not to say that I'm better than anybody else, but to help us point and build stronger towards God. If anyone in here thinks they're better than somebody else, well, I don't think that person's here tonight, actually, to be honest with you. None of us, I don't think we think that. But you know what I think sometimes? I think that you are better than me, and I think that you're better than me, and I think that you're better than me, and I can't measure up to you, and so I just want to give up, and I don't even want to try, because there's no way I can be as good as you are, or as good as you are. And that's maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but that's hard to get over sometimes. And we need to remember that we are here for the purpose of worshiping God, for glorifying Him and spreading His gospel, but also to build each other up and to edify one another, to help each other, to help us put our trust in God.
I was just thinking about Hebrews 12, and a sermon that I heard Shane Scott preach a couple weeks ago about how our faith isn't perfect because Jesus had perfect faith. And I think like when we're in these trials or these like times of questioning God, which I think is totally good and normal to do, like little Olivia having questions and talking to her mom, that's what we should be like with God. But not to look to each other, but to look to Jesus. And
Right.
to just take comfort in the grace there that we will never have perfect faith like Jesus, and He's not even asking us to do that. But to just keep trying and to keep like giving it your best.
Right.
And I think that can be really comforting when we get into that comparison game, to not compare ourselves to each other like you're saying, but to just look to Jesus.
That's right. Thank you. Verse 4 describes two kinds of people. Okay. Go ahead. I just want to hear you. That's why I come back here.
I think a tool for this is to remember that He's able to do exceedingly abundantly above, beyond what we can ask or think. God's answer may be very, very different from ours, but we can absolutely rest assured that it is better than the best answer we can think of.
Exactly.
And now, it might not seem better to us, I mean, think about the crucifixion, I can see all sorts of cool ways God could have brought that to a conclusion that day that would have been way cooler in my mind. But when we look at what happened there, and then on Pentecost, a few weeks later, some of those who were screaming to crucify Him were among the 3,000.
Yeah.
And that's God's plan, and that's His focus, and that's how stuff works. And so if I'm not imagining those things as the best answer, then I'm not even in the right ballpark.
Exactly. We can't really understand it, but He's got it under control. Those who are puffed up because they trust in themselves, those who are saved and are humble, those are the two different kinds of people. We want to be the kind that are humble. We want to trust in the Lord. I want to get down to something else here. Because the bell's about to ring. At the end of Habakkuk in chapter 3, I know we're jumping to the end of the story, but I'm already out of time. When someone gets sick, or someone dies, or something bad happens and we don't understand it, we choose to walk by faith. God told them to have faith, and this is them doing that. We have to have faith that God is in control. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength. He will make my feet like deer's feet, and He will make me walk on my high hills. Chad, if you want to ring it, that'd be fine. Any closing comments before we get out of here? I know there's a lot going on tonight. We got the Vacation Bible School had started tonight downstairs, except for the toddlers. All age group was in the Vacation Bible School class downstairs, and that will continue tomorrow and Friday. Is it Saturday too? Oh yeah, it's just Friday. Okay. Sorry. I should know the answer to that, Paula. And I think I actually did know the answer to it, but I stumbled on that. Anyway, so yeah, thanks for your participation and helping me out with that. I appreciate it.